Welcome to Gather. My very special guest today is Fiona Bayly. She runs with Urban Athletics. She was referred to me by a fan of the show. Wow, what an amazing career she's had. We're only going to scratch the surface today. I'm thrilled to have Fiona as a guest.
Thank you, Will.
Listen, before we go into your remarkable career, athletic career, as well as professional career, we're only going to scratch the surface, as I said. Yeah. Let's introduce you to our audience. Tell us where you were born, something about your childhood.
I was born in upstate New York. I'm the fourth of 5 children to an Australian mother and a British father who are both very outdoorsy and very attuned to the importance of nature in our lives. So I grew up with a lot of the awareness of what running outside would do for us. It definitely made me happy as a kid. My early interests were running and swimming. I think by the age 7 I was competing already in both those sports, which led to some great things later. But at the time I was just doing it for fun. And as my parents said regarding the swimming, it was one way to keep all 5 of us relatively clean. They joked to each other, but I also studied ballet.
Well, wait a minute. Before we go into that, upstate New York, you have to define it for us.
I'm from the real upstate, Troy, New York, which is about a 2.5-hour drive north of New York. And it's in a weather pattern that mimics Boston's. But anyway, it's Troy, New York, and that's where I grew up on a little old farm, one of the original Dutch potato farms, about 40 acres worth of wildlife. And that was part and parcel of my running, too. I think as I grew up, I ran around outside a lot. Cross-country became a big part of my life at an early age, around 11 or 12. And this was in 1980, which at the time was not at all a big thing for little girls to be doing. And, you know, the Olympic marathon wasn't even in anyone's awareness, at least with regards to women's running, until Joan Benoit Samuelson took the gold in 1984.
In the Olympics.
In the Olympics. And
it's amazing that women only really recently has come to their own.
Yes. And in those days, people thought I was a little bit crazy as a 12-year-old running on the roads, and as a 13-year-old, I received some interesting remarks from little kids and adults alike who just didn't know what I was up to. It was so radically different from what little girls were doing at the time.
But obviously your parents were very supportive.
Very supportive. My parents wanted to see us involved in things that we loved doing, and they gave us free rein almost. They were authoritative, not authoritarian. They were authoritative in saying, you know, they gave us boundaries and they explained what's dangerous and safe. But they said, as long as you can pursue what you love, and as long as we don't have to spend $1 million doing it, we support you through and through. So I found my thing.
Great. And growing up on a farm must be wonderful. So do you have to get up early to, I mean, we think of farm, you have to milk cows?
No, on my farm, it wasn't a working farm. We had a few horses every now and then and some cats and dogs. It was mostly a potato farm. It used to be, back in the old days, in the 1800s, also chicken and small livestock, but we didn't do that.
Oh, okay, but you had to work the farm.
We had to make sure that all the forests were kept under control, and we had deer hunters, and we've had, you know, live deer. We've had these 40 acres of wildlife, which could get out of control if we weren't out there working on the trees every day or making sure that the lawn was mowed with those old hand, you know, those mechanical mowers.
Good for core training, but you didn't realize you were doing that.
Pushing, you know. So a lot of, in fact, yes, you brought up a good point. My childhood was very active, and we didn't have some of the modern conveniences, even a dishwasher. I mean, part of our life was washing dishes, and, you know, we had to hike 3/4 of a mile just to get to the school bus down our own steep driveway. So, and my little friends at school couldn't understand the fact that we didn't have a blacktop driveway, for one. You know, we were rather rustic.
Okay.
But it made us tough, and it made us curious about our surroundings and environment, and it made us care about the environment as well. And I think many runners care about the environment. It's where we do our thing. And I think you'll find among us as a tribe
Yeah.
great concern about the environment.
Yes. Now, your siblings, are they also athletically minded?
When we were young, we were all on a swim team together.
But I have a feeling if I asked you who was the fastest in
Yeah.
your family,
I'm the fastest and also the shortest, smallest. I'm kind of the runt of the family, although I'm not the youngest. Birth order may have had something to do with this. I have two older brothers, one of which was also very athletic. He's 2 years older than I am, and I would bust my butt to keep up with him. In any sport, be it soccer or ice hockey. We played ice hockey as kids upstate, and I think that made me very resilient and bullheaded and competitive. And I am to this day resilient, bullheaded, and competitive.
okay. Maybe you did play with dolls, but you also wanted to run.
I wanted to be outside running.
Running.
And
You know, how do we get kids today to do that? That's like a lost art or
it
lost
is. It's
era.
It's a lost era. I think part of it has to do with diminishing green space. I love living in the city, but I don't think I could survive here without having access to Central Park, for example. And I thank my lucky stars that I do. And I wish that kids did have the opportunity to grow in greenery. They say it does so much for you physiologically, mentally. It gives the brain a rest. It inspires. It relaxes those poor neurons up there that are constantly pounded with pressure from the environment, from parents, from friends, from
Right, right.
If one can get to a natural space, I think that's a bonus for anyone.
Obviously, but the Van Cortlandt Park.
And it's idyllic. It's these spaces are heaven. I'm drawn to these spaces, and I think that's why I'm still so active. It's all very, all of these crisscrossing interests of mine, I think, very much feed upon themselves. And I trained hard in cross country, and cross country running is something that I think makes you a great road runner. You are trained in many different ways that you don't realize as a cross country runner. You are dealing with unstable surfaces, you're dealing with the elements, you're dealing with crazy terrain, steep ups, steep downs. You have to be nimble. You have to be so focused. I think when friends notice me these days, they remark on that. Some say that I turn into a different animal when I'm ready for a race, and that I become so focused it's scary. But I'm like, that's just how I am.
Your game face or your run face.
The game face,
Oh,
exactly.
sometimes they call you bitch face.
I hope it's not bitchy.
Well, they say, with a lot of love behind it.
Exactly. Every runner knows that there's this place that you go.
Now, that's when you're doing in a race. Now, when you're doing it for fun, let's say for recreational,
Yeah.
one of the things I recently discovered, I was in Van Cortlandt Park and I took part of a nature walk. We were promoting the Putnam Nature Trail.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't appreciate that we share the parks with all these birds. We hear them.
You've just touched upon something that's huge about my running.
Really?
Or should I say huge? I'm very, as some say, old school. I do not use mechanical aids. I don't ever put things in my ears. I don't use a heart rate monitor. I used to train solely with a watch that's not digital. What's that type? It's
Analog?
analog. My team captain just once, he gave me this watch because he says, just take a digital watch. But my whole thing is that I do not strap on anything to go for a run. I'm moved by birdsong. I go out, when I run, I listen for these amazing sounds that you don't hear anywhere else.
That's right,
The birds, your other runners, your footfall.
Yes.
You
yes.
learn so much about your own running when you listen to how your feet land.
Yes.
If you're a soft runner, you're doing a good thing for yourself. If you can train yourself to softly land, that's part and parcel of becoming a good runner. It's internalizing the whole mechanism, the whole biomechanical rhythm, and your body is a machine, but it's a machine that you control. And if you can hone your skills to control your footfall so that it doesn't make a sound, or that you control your breathing so that you aren't gasping when you're not supposed to be gasping. I mean, there are times to gasp.
What you're saying now is people now pay a fortune to trainers to hear that.
Yeah.
The biomechanics, the
Yeah.
footfalls,
Yeah.
learning to appreciate nature. Like I said, I only get to I mean, I always loved nature, but I wasn't aware of it as much as when I took that special walking tour to
Well
Putnam
said.
Trail.
Well said.
And the reason it was the Putnam Trail, I don't know if you're aware of it, but City Parks wants to cover it over, make it into a bicycle
No, I didn't
speedway.
know.
So I was
Oh.
there to support, not to do that.
Wow.
You know, and I just loved
Yeah.
hearing the birds, and I said, oh, you know, I got to be more conscious of
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
when I'm doing my running outdoors. But I'm glad it seems like, I guess, growing up in a farm and
Yes.
having,
Yes.
and your parents, you said they were into nature,
Yes.
so they probably taught you to appreciate the other
Yes.
creatures.
Yes. For me, definitely, I seek the outdoors.
Yes,
And
yes.
I think that's why I still love running so much.
Okay.
I don't make a decision about it. It's the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning.
Okay.
It moves me. And
Okay.
I think
All right.
as a young kid, I was running 3 times a day for this very reason. I think, you know, I would train with my team in high school, for example, in the afternoon. But by then, I've already done a morning run on my own.
Oh,
And again,
gosh.
this is at age
You're
13.
not typical. This is
No, this
this
is-
is very atypical of anybody. Where did you go to college and what did you study?
I went to Dartmouth College. I studied theater, but it was ironically only because of a hip injury that for freshman year I had to sit out the cross-country season. And so I turned to one of my other loves, which is theater. And so at Dartmouth I studied theater and performance and acting and went on to earn my master's degree at Stony Brook and came to New York to pursue a theater career as a performer, as a dancer and as an actor. But the very first 10 minutes I ever set foot in the city, I got hit by a yellow taxi cab and tore all the ligaments in my left ankle.
Oh, God.
So I had to embark immediately. It's a funny story. I had to embark immediately on a 2-year course of physical therapy for this ankle. And I had to pay my physical therapist. And within a month, I was on crutches, you know, crutching up to the New York Roadrunners. I saw an advertisement for a job from the New York Roadrunners. At the time, it was New York Roadrunners Club, and they advertised for someone to help in their sporting goods store. It was like, you know, like a very tiny store. And I started work for the New York Roadrunners Club at the time. It had that important C at the end of it. I met Fred Lebo and knew Joe Kleinerman, pioneers, and I'll always count those 9-10 years as among my most favorite ever. There I was working with some of my idols.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
And I haven't looked back at the theater ever since.
Oh, really?
So it was a very different place. And like I said, that C in the word club almost says it all. When it became New York Roadrunners without the C for club, the nature of it changed. It did. I see many wonderful things about it these days. I mean, yes, it's a huge, huge business now. And some have criticized it for being way too corporate now, for having lost its tone of being your local club.
But it can't be that
But it
anymore.
can't be that anymore. The world looks to the New York
That's
Roadrunners for leadership, and through Mary Wittenberg and its current Michael and Peter Chacha and the wonderful leaders of it now, I fully support what they do. I mean, in this day and age, there are choices to be made, and I think, although it's a huge company now, I think it does reach more people than it otherwise could have.
That's right.
There's a time for things like this. I think it has to be big.
Yes, yes.
If we're going to bring people into this wonderful sport that we love.
They do a lot of work with kids. I've
That's
seen it
right.
with Team
That's
for
right.
Kids. In fact, I think I read somewhere, you yourself love kids and you wrote a book for them?
Yes.
Tell us about that book.
After I stopped working for the New York Roadrunners and started working at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, I had some time, some non-running energy to compose a book that I'd always had in me, and it was about the New York City Marathon. It's called Fun on the Run, a scholastic peek at the New York City Marathon. And it's all about the different careers and jobs that you can find. And my target audience was anyone above 6 years old. I wrote it in rhymed verse because I'm a fan of Dr. Seuss. And I wrote like I mentioned, about all those different jobs and activities that you can find in the marathon itself beyond being a runner. The people who put on the race include not just race directors and technicians and volunteers, but also people like meteorologists and the band musicians who play that fantastic music, and the other aspects of the New York City Marathon that make it New York, like the purveyors of the trillions of bananas, or the paper cups,
The oranges.
and the nurses, and you're right, the farmers who back up the food systems for the runners, and the policemen, all the activities that take on such importance to make an event like that run smoothly. You can get it on Amazon.com. I think adults will love it. I illustrated it myself. It's just from sketches that I've collected over the past.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear.
But it's all from the sport of running, which opens so many opportunities, I think, for kids.
Absolutely.
It opens up their minds.
That's right.
It opens up their body. They become attuned to what they can do physically and mentally. And I think that's something important in this day and age where everyone's hunched over a cell phone.
That's right.
To remember that everyone's horizons are much, much larger than us.
Yes. I was reading your LinkedIn, and you did a stint with Emergency Preparedness.
Yes, yes.
Which happens to be one of the things I'm interested in.
No, yes, that's right.
Because I've been trained as a CERT member, which stands for Community Emergency Response Team. So when I saw you work for Black Umbrella, and I know the principles, I said, I was wondering, what's your interest in emergency preparedness, which is a good interest to have?
I started working with Black Umbrella, and Black Umbrella is this very, very tiny company that deals with one of the most important things, and that's preparedness for any kind of emergency, be it man-made or natural emergency, such as Hurricane Katrina or Hurricane Sandy.
Blackouts, floods, flooding.
Anything, fires. You need to be able to save yourself and your families. But what inspired me, I think, was an article I read in the New York Times highlighting the company's founder, Catherine Hooper. I thought, that's an interesting picture. And at the time, I was in between jobs. I had been working with the Wildlife Conservation Society, and I had actually just come off another stint, training my best to become a member of the U.S. Olympic triathlon team, because I'm also a multi-sport athlete. But I didn't quite make the Olympics, so I was, again, looking for a full-time job. And so this was a full-time opportunity. I wrote to Catherine saying, I noticed your picture, and I noticed your interesting job with emergency preparedness. That's fascinating. And she's a mother, and she was just attuned to the importance of it all. So I said, I'd love to be your assistant. Do you need one? And so she wrote back, she said, well, we're about to go live. Your timing is great. Would you like to join us? And so that's how I started working for Black Umbrella and became much more educated about emergency systems and the importance of being ready for a calamity. I mean, it's not a dark subject. You're talking about hopeful things, about keeping your family together and, keeping people safe and well.
Yes, some of it is common sense, like having sufficient food in the house, to think about the pets.
You have to think about a lot of things. Medicines that you're taking, you have to pack. Who will you get in touch with, and how will you get in touch with your loved ones, for example?
Because, as we know, the cell phone service goes kaput because it gets overburdened. So it's good to have a landline.
That's right.
Oh, you know what works? You probably know this.
A soup can.
It was very interesting. the public phones on the street.
Ah, yes.
People were lining up because they were working.
Yes,
you could get a call.
That's right.
And of course, one of the key things is to have a contact outside of your area.
That's right.
So the whole family can call Aunt Susie in Minnesota.
That's right. A touch point out of the city.
I talked to people about being prepared, and some people frankly said, well, when the time comes, I'm ready to die,
Or
that's
they say, when the time comes, I'll ask my doorman to get me a hotel room.
That's right. That's right, a hotel man.
Work.
or the doorman, right, that's right. He said, get me fresh direct. Well, we laugh, but it does happen, luckily, we're blessed with the Red Cross, which covers a lot of these things.
I think, and as runners, I think this is something too. When we're out there racing together, it's very much a community. I count among my favorite people, my runners, my competitors, even my rivals. And I care about my colleagues in my running community as much as I care about my colleagues at my workplace, which is the American Museum of Natural History. I find that I love the people that I work with in the office or on the roads, and my team, Urban Athletics, is to me as much of a family as my own brothers and sisters, in a different way, but in a very warm and empathetic way, because you're covering literally the same ground. As a multi-sport athlete, I've combined different sports, and it brings you these different worlds. The world of swimming is very different from the world of running.
Yes.
But again, it's similar because you're an athlete using your body in this space, be it water or air, and you're pushing through it, and you're exerting a force that derives only from you.
Yes, yes.
And I'm as inspired as those who struggle with it as I am inspired by the professionals.
Yes, yes. Let's talk about Urban Athletic. You're wearing their brush, I guess.
This is something that,
It's very short.
It's a very short shirt. It used to be longer, but I sewed it because I tend to, I don't know, I have a very...
You like the air conditioning effect.
The air conditioning. It's also part of my training, I suppose. You feel the air. Is this wonderful team headed up by Jerry McCary, an awesome masters runner in his own right. I said to Jerry, he met me at the Roadrunners when I was working there, and he said, I've noticed you're a good runner, Fiona. And
I guess you were off the crutches by then.
I was off the crutches 2 years to walk again normally. And
wow.
So it really made me want to run well again. And Jerry noticed that I was pulling down there were some fairly okay times, and he said, would you like to become the first female on my team? I'm starting it up. It's called Urban Athletics. And so from a team, this was back in 1993 or 4.
Oh gosh, another pioneer.
And so I said to Jerry,
amazing.
I would love to, but you have to understand one thing, and that is I train in the mornings, and I might not see you if you train with the team in the evenings. He says, that's okay, Fiona. Just do what just train and be part of us. And I said, I'd be happy to. And I think I'm a little bit shyer than most people expect. I'm very friendly, but I'm a little bit withdrawn.
That's the British side of your family?
Yes, reticence runs on the British side of my family. I'm a morning runner now, almost exclusively. So little by little, I've become more attuned to the team and its underpinnings and the new people coming in. And that makes me feel even better about Urban Athletics. I embrace it with all that I have. And it's like I say, it might not be as much as every other runner on the team, but I've never run for another team here in New York, and I don't want to change teams. Urban Athletics for me it's a small, distinct group of runners that cares deeply about each other. And we don't have a deep bench. But we pull each other along with energy and spirit.
When I started running, the first place they took me was to Urban Athletics when they were downtown.
That's right.
The Winter Garden.
Yes, we had a store downtown until 9/11.
And it lasted for a few more years after that. I think it was one of the few that stayed after 9/11.
I think it tried, but for now our only store is all that we need. It's the one on Madison.
Madison 91st?
Madison and 91st, exactly.
Okay.
And Jerry is still he's our team
I
captain.
know, I know. And he has the cutest baby now.
And he has a cute, charming child. He's like a brother to me. I don't need to explain to him anything. I just say, Jerry, all I want to do is run and compete. And he's like, I know you do.
Okay.
Love.
Okay. You also have an interesting career professionally. You have all these jobs. You're very much like the current generation where people say nobody works more than 3 or 4 years in one position. In the old days, you stayed with the same company for 30 years.
Yeah.
You're not one of those people.
Well,
you said with the museum?
Yes.
And what is your position there?
I'm an administrative assistant to one of the larger departments there. It concerns itself with biodiversity and conservation. It's
beautiful.
It's a wonderful aspect of my life that, and I hope I don't change jobs again. I think in the past I've changed jobs only because, like I said, I took time out at one point to train for the Olympics in triathlon, and that disrupted a little bit of continuity. But that was only between positions at the Wildlife Conservation Society. So there's a fairly good period of time there. I think a total of 6 years there. But I would love to just stay where I am now.
Okay.
And just, dare I say, live out my years. there. It's such a supportive
in New
environment.
York.
In New York.
I mean,
I
that's
love New
a
York.
classical
I'm just in
institution.
love with New York. And as someone once brought up at the beginning of one of these recent races, New York City is probably one of the most competitive hotbeds of running in the nation, in
That's
the
right.
world. Some
That's
of the
right.
finest post-collegiate
That's right.
races are
That's right.
occurring right in our backyard.
And when you step up to the line, you're the favorite to come in first with your age group.
Well,
That's amazing.
I try to live up to it, and I'm very proud of that aspect, and I'm
You've done
moved.
dozens of races. You come in first as a
I
Masters.
keep trying, and I hope
continue.
to inspire as a Masters runner.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
You have, obviously, you have. Now, what are some of your future challenges? You said professionally you want to continue what you're doing now. And I'd love to hear more about this biodiversity and conservation, but
Yes.
we'll do that
Yes.
offline. So what are some of your challenges athletically? What's one of your goals coming up?
One of my goals, well, every year I enter a few of these recurring New York Roadrunners events. For example, a flagship race is the all-women's 10K coming up in early June. It used to be called the Legs Mini Marathon. Then it was Advil Mini Marathon. And but it's still that same 10K that years and years ago was founded for women. And
Catherine Switz was one of them.
that's right, Catherine Switzer,
And
Greta
Nina
Waits,
Cusack.
Nina Cusack, and
Cusack.
yep, and all those pioneers. I think it was most well known as the Legs Mini, but always a 10K distance, always for only women, and it's famous for that.
That's right.
But I also love running in the co-ed races because you're there with the guys who are so supportive, and they give you a different view on things. I think, female runners, male runners, we bring different aspects to the running. We bring different abilities. We bring different body sizes. We bring different physical biomechanics. We were built differently. We have different strengths. Our endurance capacities are different. Some say the trend is that women outperform men in the very long distances. It really depends. But the whole physiological thing behind it is fascinating for me, but also I find it fun to run with the guys, with the men. I find it fun to run with the women. Fun to run with the young ones, fun to run with the old ones. I have idols. I mean, I have people older than I am who I hope to be like when I'm 60, 70. I hope to be running with their kind of speed and their kind of joy.
And on that note, thank you so much for coming in.
Will.
It's a
Thank
pleasure.
you. I loved being here.